We are live.
We are. We are back.
Yeah.
The
All
men, the
right. Here
men
we
in black
go.
are back.
That's right.
My buddy, how's it going, man?
What's up, Steve? Man, I am
You
chilling.
chilling?
Just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, no big storms
Yeah. So,
this week.
yeah, I
So
was
that's a
telling people.
nice.
So you're all good. You made through the weather.
Yep,
No,
made it.
no
Made
issues.
it.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
survived. I'm us down here, us Central Floridians, we're survivors at the end of the day. That's what we do is we
You
survive.
survived. Well, that's good. I'm
Yeah.
glad to hear that. I'm glad. That's way better than the alternative. So,
That's right. Yeah, yeah, it is better.
well, man. So today's topic. Let's jump right in. Real first, up quick.
Let's go.
Let's real first
Yeah.
up quick highlight our sponsor. So our sponsor on today's episode is Worship Probs, and Worship Probs creates resources and tools that help ministry leaders in the trenches. So you guys can go check out their community on Facebook, or you can follow them on Instagram. They also have an amazing podcast that we had the privilege of helping build some content for, Worship Karaoke. So also check that out. But they're sponsors of ours in this episode of ProPresenter Power Talks, and we are so stoked that they're here. So let's dive into what we're talking about today. So today, I thought, Shake, we would
Let's
talk
go.
about um, the face-off. So maybe we call this an episode of versus. Versus.
Hmm.
So should
Hmm.
you build your content in ProPresenter versus should
Hmm.
you build your content outside of ProPresenter and bring it in? So I think this might be a
Right.
topic that maybe some people encounter. I was recently have encountered it some recently in some stuff that I do with ProPresenter on the side and some discussions I've had. So I thought it'd be a good question. So let's start off, Shake, man.
Yeah.
This is gonna be more theoretical in nature, probably less going into
Yeah.
ProPresenter
Right.
talking. But like when you were using ProPresenter in kids ministry and ministry in general, would you build the content outside of ProPresenter and bring it in, or what was your flow and how you did that? And then talk through like why you did that, one, and then two, like
Mhm.
what were some of the benefits of doing that, and what were some of the challenges of doing that?
Sure. Yeah, I would build. I mean, I pretty much built everything outside of ProPresenter. Now, obviously, over this last year, I've learned from you so much about how to build stuff within ProPresenter. But so the reason that I built everything out. So number one is because I didn't know any other way. I mean, I guess I knew that there was some asset building tools within
Mm.
the ProPresenter ecosphere.
Right.
But the times that I played with it, it just was very kind of rudimentary and even a little bit clunky. I think I was using a previous version of ProPresenter, and for me, first and foremost, I'm a communicator. So I have a very specific idea of what I want, how I want to communicate things,
Mhm.
and so working outside of ProPresenter using Photoshop, using After Effects, Illustrator, all those things, I was able to create exactly what I wanted. I
Right.
could do it pretty quickly. Um, and then kind of move everything into ProPresenter. I remember there were times where I was in service and an idea would hit me and I would create something on the spot, and within a few minutes have it up on the screen from my laptop to the display computer to the screen, and obviously you got to know your stuff if you're going to do that, and you also have to be and this was in either youth student ministry environment or kids ministry environment, so the
Right.
not that the standards are lower, but you can kind of get away with a little bit more.
Well, and
and
what I've
uh
heard
and
from
and
you is that you kind of set yourself up for that by having the ProPresenter machine nearby. So you almost kind of
right.
crafted your environment in a way that facilitated that, quick, easy sharing of content
Right.
because it was right next to you. If the computer had been back in the
Yeah.
back of the room and you in the front, that probably would have
Right.
inhibited that flow, more, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Right. And I think overall, obviously if you're leading a ministry, the the style, the personality of that ministry is going to kind of mimic your personality to an extent, And so I did, not even necessarily intentionally, but my personality was built into that ministry. Um, so yeah, I love doing things on the fly and coming up with stuff. And to a degree, I love kind of the danger of that. Like, you're
The
creating
danger zone.
and you yeah,
I'm
yeah,
hearing like
yeah.
the Mission Impossible.
Um, oh man, there are
Speaking of
so many
which, did you
times I
see did you see Tom Cruise jump off of?
No, that's so I didn't watch a lot of the closing ceremonies.
Oh
I
man.
was at lunch for a long time yesterday with some friends of ours, so I was kind of watching it in one of the screens behind us, but I didn't really key in.
Okay.
By the time I got home, I was watching a little bit of it, but the stuff that I saw was kind of inconsequential.
Mm,
There was nothing I saw that was like that interesting. Although I did see Tom's tweet from wherever he was. um, I saw some of the concerts at the beach in LA.
yep, yep.
So that
Snoop
was fun.
Snoop Dogg and Dre. Yep. Which by the way, still
Yeah.
the
Yep.
best time, the best halftime Super Bowl show I think I've ever witnessed was theirs a couple years ago in LA, which is pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Mary J. and
Uh,
was Eminem and Kendrick?
maybe, but it was Dre and him at the start, and they had that
Right.
like platform
Yeah.
rising and all that. It was pretty sweet. So,
Yep. Yeah. 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 That was cool.
so what's one thing that you've learned in our conversation over the last few months that you maybe built outside of ProPresenter that you would consider building in ProPresenter now?
Well, I'll tell you what. If I'm streaming, I would make sure that as much of my stuff was built in ProPresenter.
Mm,
Um, or if I have multiple formats that I'm trying to do, those things I would build within ProPresenter. Um, I was we weren't streaming, so
right,
there wasn't the pressure of that. But for me, I tend to default to I want it to look a certain way. And if ProPresenter is not going to help me get there, or if ProPresenter can't get there, then I'm going to create as much as possible, outside of ProPresenter and bring it in. Um, Obviously, it takes a certain personality to do that. It takes a certain skill set. It takes a certain comfortability, not only with the software but also with the hardware, and knowing how to transfer stuff over. And I mean, 10 years ago, it was like flash drives. Eventually, it was like Dropbox or Google Drive. And just kind of knowing what you need to get things from one computer to the other,
yep,
how to render things to minimize the potential of crashing or failure. Um, so it is. I mean, it requires a level of comfortability that probably most people don't have.
right. I mean, I think one thing though I would encourage people, and I think this is something that people don't necessarily think of because you're even saying it like, I know how I want it to look in Photoshop, and I think ProPresenter has come a long way to where maybe some complex stuff can't. But what you want
Mhm.
it to look like in Photoshop, much of those same features are inherently in ProPresenter. So, like some of the things I'm thinking about, I don't think people realize you can load fonts into ProPresenter. So, ProPresenter
Okay.
pulls from your font library. So, if you have Adobe Cloud at your campus for your church, you can install Go Adobe Cloud on your ProPresenter machine, and if you
Mm.
choose a specific font in your design, you can load that font into ProPresenter, and now you can use that font in your slides. So people, you can use those fonts. You can put strokes. You can say how much those strokes are going to be.
Mhm.
You can put shadows. You can put outlines. You can do text that's built like that outlines the text so that it's like connected to that text. So whatever you put here outlines it in the same way. There's all these features that you can do that allow you to recreate. In essence, what has to happen in your flow is you got to go from here's how I create it in Canva, Photoshop, whatever it is. Once I have the look the way that I want it, okay, now I need to go and build out those slides in ProPresenter and go think through what did I do? Okay, so the title graphic was this. It was this font. with this stroke, with this embellishment, with this shadow, at this.
Right.
Like you have to go input that in. But if you go and input that in, you can match your design perfectly. Like, and so that's what I do is I load in the font for like if I'm given free reign to do whatever I want. When a designer hands me a file for a sermon series that's been approved by the team, higher above me usually, because by this point I'm not the one who's speaking to what the series is going to be. So I'm given a set of asset files. So I take the Photoshop file. I want the font that was used. So if they don't give it to me, I want to know what font was used. And I go get that font and I load that in Photoshop. And then I open up the artwork and I look at how the font was used. So is it a title font that was the title and then a sub font and figure that out? And then what I usually try to do is use those fonts in my sermon notes. So on my scripture slide,
Yeah.
the one font is the title font. You know, the one that's the most readable is going to be my scripture, and the one that's maybe got the most flair is going to be my reference of where that scripture is found.
Hmm.
I'm going to create a lower third image to put as a background, but then the text, I'm going to manipulate it to look and match the way the series looks. So I'm going to, if there's a crazy stroke on it that makes it look this way, I'm going to try to match that. If it's got, a spacing, I'm going to try to match that. So like I'm going to try to set it all up so that it looks like, oh, that's from that same package. It all matches together.
Yeah.
But by building that in ProPresenter now I can do things really quick, really fast, and like you talked about for streaming, because now I can just pull themes that I've created. Okay, here's the quote theme.
Yeah.
Here it is. Here's the scripture theme. Here it is. Here's the notes. How I want the notes to be. Whatever it is, and it all matches. The background matches the title artwork. Has the same look. The font matches it all, and so it's all
Hmm.
consistent and it's all there. And all it took was building outside of ProPresenter, but then saying, okay, one step further, I'm now going to build it into ProPresenter. So how do I take what I've done outside? What's my idea out here? How do I bring that into and create an ecosystem within ProPresenter? And I would do that for every series. And, you know, prayerfully, I hope your pastor isn't changing series each week because it does take a couple hours to kind of do that. Even if you're
Yeah.
reusing an old template, what I would do is just to save time, pull an old theme in, pull all the files in, and then I would change and manipulate the images and the things so that I had all the text boxes there. I just needed to change what I want to be and how I want it to look. But hopefully your series is 4, 5, 6 weeks at least, because then you're doing it once and you've got it for the series. But what I think I would just say, and you kind of hit on this, is like if you create everything outside of ProPresenter, which I think in our industry we're seeing a shift to where everything's being created outside of ProPresenter, and there's reasons for that. So, for example,
Hmm.
I help a church consistently each week set up their ProPresenter files. They had a event they started doing last year. It's called like a Discover lunch, and so I would create their slide deck for them. Well, they weren't making the slide deck for a ProPresenter room; it was for a like gathering room, and they just wanted slides. And so I created it in Adobe Express, which is kind of like
Hmm.
a cheap, simplified version of Photoshop, right? So I created everything in there,
Yeah.
and then I export out files, and it allowed me to. The reason I created it in that was it allowed me to create a slide for each thing, export it as a PDF, send it to them as a PDF, have them review it, and then make changes, and then export all the images as one file, as one folder, and go.
Right.
And it wasn't in ProPresenter. They didn't have to have ProPresenter to run it. They could throw it in Keynote, whatever they wanted to do. But as we've gone on in the past few months, we've realized that it's kind of staying the same. Periodically, they're just going to change questions because they're kind of doing like a trivia about their church. Well, now it's to the point where we would love to just have that as a ProPresenter file that they could go in and create a new slide and create a new question, and then all the other questions are still there. But I've created it outside, and so now every time they want something, I've got to go in there and redo the presentation for them. In essence. And
Yeah.
so we're going to move to converting that into a ProPresenter file. That way they can just load it up on the machine in the production booth and go, okay, this week we're not going to do that question, or we're not going to do this question, remove those, boom, export it out, and now I'm good to go. So I think there's kind of a shift. That's an example of like the need to go back to a ProPresenter file. But there is a shift in our industry, in the church world where I think we're creating a lot of stuff with the tools like Canva and Adobe Express. We're creating all this stuff outside of ProPresenter, which is great. If you are in a church where there's one feed to your TVs and you're not using a stage display, which I think is also in a future episode, I think we might cover stage display because I'm realizing I don't think anyone knows what that means. But if you have a display in the back of the room on the wall for your pastor that shows the same thing that's up front and it's not a separate feed, then that's just another screen that's taking that one feed. If that's your setup, then it's probably really easy and there's probably no issue in creating Canva content, Photoshop content, whatever files, and then exporting out JPEGs and bringing that into your presentation. You probably aren't going to run into a lot of issues. But where you will run
Yeah.
into issues, and where I see churches, I think, starting to run into issues is if you want to quickly change things in the middle of a sermon, in the middle of a service, like live, if you want to dedicate a feed for your stream and show content on your stream that's customized for them, different than what's in the room, you have to shift to a model where you create the content in ProPresenter. And I would say that I think that's, or whatever presentation software, you need to create the content within ProPresenter. Because if you do that, you can utilize ProPresenter or whatever software you're using to help you make quick changes instantaneously that you don't even have to try to manage. But if you've created everything outside and your pastor says, well, I want to now go, instead of going to Matthew 16:17 in the ESV, I want to go to Matthew 16:17 in the NIV. Well, the only way you do that if you've created it outside is you go and have to create a whole new slide. But if you're in ProPresenter and you
Mhm.
have all the Bibles purchased, well, you could type it, and I can within a couple seconds have that scripture pulled up and matched to a theme and be ready to show it on the fly. So that's the kind of stuff that I think like there's a versus that you have to kind of play with. Like, what do I
Mhm.
create outside of Pro because it's going to work better, and what do I create inside of Pro because it's going to work? It's going to be best for the service. And I was telling you,
Yeah,
Shake. I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, and I think that's the thing to realize is that there are pros and cons.
Right.
In any decision that you make, you've got the opportunity cost, of like you can make it look better outside, but it you're creating kind of an inflexible environment,
Right.
and so if you're cool with that, then it is what it is. Um, but I think, yeah, that's kind of the trade-off.
Yeah. I thought I'd show real quick. So this is not to demand like this is what you should do. This is more to
Mhm.
just say this is what I do, and it might be helpful for our conversation. What I've found is
To
that to
elucidate.
yeah, elucidate. Nice big word there. Um, let's see if this for some reason. Let's just restart ProPresenter because it's not showing the slide. So just give me one sec. Let me restart us here. But what I've found to work um, is that there's kind of a yin and yang here, and you have to figure out what is the perfect sweet spot for your church. And the way that I would encourage you to do that is potentially, open up for dialogue with your staff team. So,
Hmm.
your communications team, your tech team, your pastor, open up for dialogue about this and talk about the pros and the cons to doing, each one. But what I would say is this: I found that most oftentimes pre and post content can be created outside of ProPresenter. I don't need the text layers to be editable in ProPresenter. Like, I don't need to be able to edit the connect slide because that's the same every single week. Okay. So my pre-content is
Yeah.
going to most often be something that's been created outside of ProPresenter and brought into outside of ProPresenter and then brought in. So it's video content for walls, it's slide content for screens, whatever it is. That's all created outside. Same thing for like a countdown. I don't need the countdown to really be editable. But that's an example of that's where I would say is talk to your team, because maybe your team wants the
Right.
ability to Sunday say, hey, we're going to do a 5 minute countdown. And the next Sunday, we want to do a 3 minute countdown. Like, I have been in
Hmm.
situations, not in church world, but in like event situations where they're like, I want to be able to tell you what kind of countdown time I want. Well, then in that case, if on the fly I need to create a countdown instantly, then I need to have that set up in a timer that I can type the number and hit go and show that countdown properly. So
Yeah.
talk with your team through that. What does that look like in your church? But what I would say is more oftentimes than not, pre and post content is going to be not editable easily and quickly. But then once we get into the service, when I'm actually into the service, it's all done in ProPresenter. And why that is because then I can make changes quickly and effectively right off the bat. So I can change lyrics, I can pull lyrics, I can change choruses, I can change verses, I can do anything and everything I need to do right at a moment's notice instantaneously. My welcome information. I will use pre made content, uh, but I also am accepting that I won't be able to edit that content to say anything else other than what it says currently. So if you want to be able to edit content in the welcome, you might need to consider changing what you do there.
Yeah.
And then where I think the biggest thing that churches probably need to consider is the sermon, because if pastors are making the content off site on Canva, on Adobe Express, whatever it is, I know some pastors who want to create their own slide content. That's great. But there's then no way for that tech team to edit, change, manipulate, and serve you really
Hmm.
doing anything other than, hey, I don't have a slide. You know what I mean? Um,
Right.
so if you create the content in ProPresenter, I can edit down to words. I can change themes for the series. I can set up, my scripture looks, my points,
Hmm.
my quotes. I have everything built here. And so when a pastor says, I want to add a slide, I want to add a slide. Okay, well, cool. Here, I'll add a slide right here. Boom. What do you want it to say? I can do it right
Hmm.
there. Hey, I want to pull in scripture, John 3:1. Well, there it is. Boom. I got I got it pulled up for you. And then I add the correct macro to it and we're all set. Like all that, all that's there. Like that's within ProPresenter ready to go. So it does take a little bit of like forethought and planning. Which do I need? And then once you're in the moment, if you've thought through that, you're set to go. And the reason that some of this has come up
Hmm.
recently is churches, I think, may be thinking, okay, I'm building outside of ProPresenter because it's easier as a team throughout the week to manage stuff in a graphical environment on the cloud. So Canva and whatever, Adobe Express or even Photoshop in the Dropbox setting. It's easier for us to
Hmm.
manage that as a team externally. We don't have to go to the ProPresenter machine and do that. Well, that's true. But then when you get to Sunday and you'd like to show content on your side screens in a lower third format and you want to show stuff on a center screen in a full screen format, it doesn't work because you've now built all your content to one specific resolution. So unless you built the
Right.
slides two ways, and then ProPresenter, I would say this, like ProPresenter doesn't do a good job of really manipulating. There's not really an easy way. There is a way to do it. It's not easy. There, to show a graphic on a large center screen format and then show a lower third graphic on another screen format. It's possible,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
it's a workaround because in essence, what you have to do is you have to put the graphic information in the media slide on the slide, and then you have to create a prop for that slide and put your lower third in, and you have to trigger that prop to show up on that slide, and then clear when it goes to the next slide. Well, what happens then is this: you have I have maybe 30 props here. You'll have hundreds. You'll have hundreds of props because if you have 100 sermon slides, you're going to have a prop for every single one of those.
Mm.
So now you're trying to manage a whole library of ProPresenter props with your slide content and making sure they're all right. And that's just, I'm telling you, it's a straight nightmare. Um,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
and it's
And
not good. So I will tell you this too. Last year, last 2 years ago, I had a situation where a entity came in and used a venue that I helped set stuff up for, and they had a prop. They had over 125 props, and they were
oof,
using it to trigger different stuff, and it froze the machine because it was just too much. Like it was too
right.
much for ProPresenter in that situation.
Yeah, and I wonder too if another happy medium is so let's say you're this wouldn't solve the issue that you just talked about, but let's say you are at a church where the pastor wants to create his own slides. Um, if you could then translate that style into a template slide,
Yep.
the look that he kind of submitted, if you can take those elements and make it look the same way in ProPresenter, that's another way to give yourself some flexibility while still kind of maintaining the integrity that you want. You know.
Yeah. So I think you're hitting on that's actually a perfect option is to recreate the slides for
Hmm.
stream purposes and then throw
Right.
his slides as the backgrounds and show those on the wall and then have a theme set
Right.
up for the content that's on there. That's
Yeah.
totally possible. The other solution I had pitched to a church recently was if he creates it in full screen slides, cool. Well, then utilize, let me go to my screen here so I can show you. And I think so. Sorry, over here, utilize the left half of your screen and create a template where it puts the slide over here,
Mm.
and then it has
Hmm.
like a blurred gradient behind it, some sort of design, so that then it shows the full screen slide over here, all the full screen slides here, but then there's like a gradient effect wrapped up over here behind it, and then just tell your. But the reason that's important to talk through is then you have to tell your camera operators, hey, we're going to have a shot that's always set for
Yeah.
notes, and it has the pastor. It's going to feel weird, but put the pastor over on the one side of the screen. I want you to leave him on this side of the screen. You only have this much screen to work with, and leave the everything else, leave it clear because we're going to in essence put a slide up there. So
Yeah.
that's a
Right.
way you could do that, and like you can do that, you can build that in ProPresenter. To be honest, like I mean, you can go into your theme here and create a new theme and call it, slides, and you can create a box, a rectangular box, and I mean, you could do one of two things. You could either like do a gradient ramp, so if you wanted to make it like full half screen, you could do this. So you can do a gradient ramp to it, and you could make it, whatever colors of your series are. So say it's this, and then have it set to kind of like ramp like that. You could also do a fade. So one thing that I've been playing around with a little bit is you could also fade it out like
Oh, change the
this.
opacity. Yeah.
So change that
Mm.
to be that, and then you could shift it to be like this and make this like that. So you'll see that it'll go from your color all the way to it'll fade. So then
Yeah.
when you put your
Right.
slide, you know, you can put your media. In essence, what you would do is you would create a
Like a mat.
it's a no, it's a shape. So it's you would go to video input, but then you would fill it with a screen object. So you
Okay.
would screen object it the center screen or whatever your screen is, and now you can
Right.
create a
Right.
1920 by 1080 version of it like this, so that it would show up. and
Yeah.
you would have a little bit of a design flair to it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you can think through that, and talk through that and figure out what is the best way to actually do this. So that's where some of that'll help you out is like talking through what what is the desired outcome and how I can accomplish this. But just know, I think, it is good for churches to know that if you're trying to do streaming and a customized experience in the room, that becomes pretty complex pretty quick if you're not
Right.
building the stuff in ProPresenter. So if you aren't and you're running into issues, because like what I've seen some is like, well, I know ProPresenter can do both. It can, but you really need to be building everything in there. So you need to build the text, the lyrics, all that needs to be in there. Don't be trying to bring in 200 slides from Canva and then expect ProPresenter to be able to read the text on that. You know what I mean? ProPresenter doesn't
Yeah.
read the text on the slide and then repopulate it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I
So
think as ProPresenter continues to improve and grow, hopefully there are better and better creation options so that you can get as close to a external experience as possible.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I think I would say too. Like there is some limits. There are sure, and there's continuing to work to do better. But there's a lot of stuff that it can do inherently
Yeah.
now. So like
Sure.
animations, it can animate boxes in, it can animate text in. So like
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
I would say before you try to say like ProPresenter can't do it, think through what am I trying to accomplish with this
Right.
animation or with this graphic, and then go spend half an hour and see if you can get ProPresenter to match it for you.
Sure.
Um, the other thing too is a hybrid model. So like I would do this I would build for a sermon series graphic, I would take the artwork background and export it as a JPEG to use
Yeah.
across.
Right.
But then I would take the title art and I would make it
PNG.
a see-through PNG,
Yeah.
and I would then have the title art that I could put in as a prop, and I could bring that in a lot of different ways. I could bring that
Yeah.
in the
Right.
slide. I could bring that in, and it was editable then, like itself. So think of creative ways to do both. Like, okay, I've now separated out the graphic elements on this title slide. So I have the background, I have the overlay, I have the title, I have the subtitle. They're all separate pieces, and I can manipulate and show those how I want.
Yeah.
Because that's what ProPresenter a lot of times is looking for is the assets and how they're like organized. Um, so you can look at that. So
Yeah. That's awesome.
yeah, so it's really kind of a versus, like, in the sense of not really one is, I think there's a standard across the space of like trying to build everything in ProPresenter, but I also think there's a lot of churches that just doesn't work for. But I would just say like have that have this conversation that Sheik and I had, like,
Hmm.
with your team of like, hey, I want to do this, but I also need this ability, or your tech team, hey, we want to be able to quickly and effectively help you on Sunday. In order to do that, we need this. Like, have
Right.
those conversations, have those dialogues, and I think that will help you enhance your presentations consistently week in and week out for what you're doing. So,
Yeah. I love it.
yeah, man. Any parting words of wisdom? Any graphical know-how
No, I
tips?
love that. Like learn your stuff, learn your learn your gear, learn your software.
Hmm.
You know,
Yep.
take some time. I
Ruminate
think
with it. Take
I
a nice
think
cup of
it's
coffee and go sit in front of it.
yeah. Well, exactly. I think your relationship with ProPresenter really can mimic the relationship you have with your loved ones. You got to take some time. You got to invest. You got to learn to listen. You know
My
what I mean?
ProPresenter can't come anywhere close to my wife, but yes, I get what you mean.
I mean,
Careful,
you know.
all of our loved ones will be like, I don't like this anymore. I'm tuning out of ProPresenter Power Talks.
I'm just saying, you show a little respect to ProPresenter, show a little love to ProPresenter. They'll love you back.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, man, I appreciate you. This was a good one. I think this is. If any of you are watching this, I don't know how many have been tuning in recently. I haven't checked the last couple of weeks, but if you watch this live or watch this after a rerun, and you have questions, your church, something you want to, get some input on, shoot. I mean, I'll just open it up. If you want to just have some fun and you got a future series coming up and you want to create it together, create some
Oh,
themes and
yeah.
looks together with Shake and I, we'd love to have you
Yeah.
on. Just reach out to us. You can reach out to us, drop information, drop feedback, drop questions. You can send us an email at propresenter@churchvisuals.com, propresenter@churchvisuals.com, or you can reach out to us on our Facebook group, the visual community Facebook group of Church Visuals,
Hmm.
or you can
Hmm.
just hit us up on social media if you're following one of us personally. DM us. We'd love to hear from you. But if you'd like to come on and create your next series together and work through that, love to do that. If there's questions you have, year questions, hey, how do I do that? I'm looking to try to do this in the fall with my church, or I'm looking to try to do this for Christmas with my church. I mean, I don't know about Shake. I geek out with that kind of stuff. So we would love
Yeah, I
this
love it.
time that we spend on Monday, even though Shake and I love talking to each other. We really would love to make this useful for you as a ministry leader. And so if there's something we could do with you on this platform together to serve you and your church, I would love for you to be a part. So reach out and let us know.
Yep, for sure.
Faux show. So thanks again to our sponsor, Worship Probs, today for sponsoring us. If you guys have any questions, let us know. We'll see you next week. Shake, you're good for next week around noon,
Let's
12 noon?
let's do it.
Cool. Well, we'll see you guys next
Party
week,
on.
and we'll be ready to party. Later.
That's right. Later.